He hears music in dead wood, but he never heard a word I said. That is how my mother described my father to her lawyer the day she filed for divorce. I know because I found the transcript years later, buried in a box of documents she left behind when she moved to California with her new husband. She had rehearsed that line, I think. It was too perfect, too poetic, too precisely calibrated to wound. My father never responded to it. Not in court, not in private, not once in the 23 years between that moment and the day he died. He just went back to his workshop, picked up his tools, and continued doing the only thing he had ever truly loved: building violins. When he died, my brother got the house. My sister got the savings account, $280,000 accumulated over 40 years of patient, careful work. I got the workshop, 47 violins that smelled like wood shavings and varnish, a workbench covered in tools I did not know the names of, and a leather notebook with my name written on the cover in my father's careful hand. I did not laugh. I did not cry. I opened the notebook to the first page and read, Violin number 1. German workshop instrument, circa 1880. Purchased at an estate sale in Bridgeport, 1986. During restoration, I discovered a compartment carved into the neck block. Inside, a lock of hair tied with a blue ribbon and a note reading for my daughter, when she is old enough to play. I have been unable to locate any descendants. The hair remains inside the violin, where it belongs. I looked up from the notebook and stared at the rows of instruments hanging on the walls of my father's workshop. 47 violins, 47 entries, 47 secrets he had kept for 35 years. I should have seen it coming. The signs were all there, stretching back to the first time I watched my father hold a violin up to the light and whisper to it like it was a living thing. My name is Nathan Ashford, and this is the story of how 47 violins taught me that my father was never silent. He was just speaking a language I did not understand. My father, Henry Ashford, was a luthier. Most people did not know what that word meant. They would nod politely when he explained it, their eyes glazing over as he described the art of building and restoring stringed instruments. They did not understand that a luthier was not just a craftsman. A luthier was a translator, converting raw wood into the precise mathematical curves and thicknesses that could make a piece of maple and spruce sing like a human voice. My father learned the craft from his father, who had learned it from his father, who had brought the knowledge from Germany in 1892. For generations of Ashfords had spent their lives in workshops filled with wood shavings and varnish fumes, building instruments that would outlive them by centuries. My father took it further than any of them. He was not just a builder. He was a restorer, a detective, a historian. When a damaged violin came into his workshop, he did not just fix it. He researched it. He traced its lineage back through decades of previous owners, through estate sales and antique shops and the hands of musicians long dead. He learned the names of the craftsmen who had built it, the cities where it had been played, the concerts it had witnessed. Every violin has a story, he told me once. When I was 8 years old and watching him work on a battered instrument that looked like it belonged in a trash heap, the wood remembers everything. The scratches, the repairs, the hands that held it. My job is to listen. But it does not talk, I said. He smiled, that rare smile that transformed his serious face into something warm and approachable. Everything talks, Nathan. Most people just do not know how to listen. My mother never learned how to listen. Or maybe she did, and she simply did not like what she heard. Diana Ashford was a woman who measured the world in concrete terms. Dollars, square footage, social standing. She had married my father when they were both 24, drawn to his quiet intensity and his artist's hands. She thought she was marrying a craftsman with potential, someone who would eventually open a prestigious shop or teach at a conservatory or do something that could be explained at dinner parties. Instead, she got a man who spent 12 hours a day in a basement, talking to pieces of wood. "I did not sign up for this," she said one night, her voice carrying down the stairs to where I sat pretending to do homework. "I did not marry you to spend my life as a workshop widow. I have work to finish," my father replied, his voice calm and measured, the same tone he used when explaining why a certain piece of spruce was unsuitable for a violin top. The Hendrix instrument needs to be ready by Thursday. The Hendrix instrument. The Morrison restoration. The estate sale evaluation. She laughed bitterly. Do you even remember your children's names? Do you remember that you have a wife who has not had a real conversation with you in 3 years? Diana. Do not Diana me. You are down here every night until midnight. You spend weekends at estate sales instead of with your family. You have missed every single one of Charlotte's recitals. I send the instruments that play at her recitals. That is not the same thing, and you know it. My father was quiet for a long moment. I could picture him standing at his workbench, his hands still, his eyes focused on something my mother could not see. I am sorry, he finally said. I do not know how to be what you want me to be. I want you to be present. I want you to be here. I want you to hear me when I talk to you instead of listening to wood. The wood does not judge me. The wood does not want me to be something I am not. The wood does not love you either. She left the workshop. I heard her footsteps on the stairs, her bedroom door closing with a finality that echoed through the house. She filed for divorce 6 months later. The custody battle was brief and brutal. My mother wanted all 3 of us, my older brother Marcus, my younger sister Charlotte, and me. She argued that my father was emotionally absent, that he was incapable of providing the nurturing environment children needed, that his obsession with his work made him unfit for primary custody. My father did not fight. He agreed to joint custody every other weekend and Wednesday evenings, and he went back to his workshop. Marcus was 16. He chose to live with our mother full-time because her new house had a pool and was closer to his friends. Charlotte was 10, young enough to be dazzled by the promises of shopping trips and vacations, and all the things my mother could provide now that she was no longer tied to a craftsman's modest income. I was 12, old enough to choose, old enough to understand what I was choosing. I chose my father. Why? My mother asked, genuinely bewildered. He will not even notice you are there. He will be in that basement every night while you eat dinner alone. I like the basement, I said. You like wood shavings and silence? I like Dad. She looked at me the way she had looked at my father for the last few years of their marriage, with a mixture of pity and frustration, like I was a puzzle she had given up trying to solve. You will regret this, she said. You will end up just like him, alone in a basement, talking to things that cannot talk back. She was wrong about that. My father was never alone, and the things in his workshop talked back in ways she could never understand. Living with my father was different from what I expected. He did spend most of his time in the workshop. That part was true. But he was not absent the way my mother claimed. He was just present in a different way. Every morning he made breakfast. Simple things, eggs and toast and orange juice, but he made them himself and he sat with me while I ate. He asked about school, about my friends, about the books I was reading. He listened to my answers with the same focused attention he gave to his instruments. He did not talk much during these meals. That was not his way. But his silence was not emptiness. It was attention. It was the quiet of someone who was actually listening instead of just waiting for their turn to speak. Every evening he invited me to the workshop. Not demanded, not required. Invited. I am working on the Castellano violin tonight, he would say. It has a crack in the top plate that is going to require some creative problem solving. You are welcome to watch if you want. I always wanted. The workshop was its own world. 20 feet by 15, with low ceilings and bare concrete floors. But my father had transformed it into something extraordinary. Violins hung on every wall, some complete and gleaming, others in various states of disassembly, their naked wood exposed like patients in surgery. Workbenches lined 2 walls, covered with tools whose names I slowly learned. Gouges and chisels, planes and scrapers, clamps of every size, brushes for applying varnish so thin you could see through it. The smell of that place is something I will never forget. Wood shavings and varnish and rosin, and the particular mustiness of old instruments that had been played for generations. It smelled like patience, like concentration, like centuries of craftsmanship distilled into a single room. I learned more in that workshop than I ever learned in school. Not just about violins, though I learned plenty about those. My father taught me the names of the woods. Spruce for the top, maple for the back and sides, ebony for the fingerboard and pegs. He taught me how to read the grain, how to tap a piece of wood and listen for the tone it would produce, how to feel the difference between a piece that would sing and a piece that would always stay silent. He taught me about patience, about the kind of deep attention that turns hours into minutes. A single repair might take days or weeks, and rushing it would only make it worse. The violin will tell you when it is ready, he would say. Your job is to listen. He taught me about respect for materials and tools and the people who had used them before. Every instrument that came into his workshop had a history, a lineage of hands that had shaped it and played it and loved it. When he worked on a violin, he was not just fixing an object. He was participating in a conversation that had been going on for centuries. Most importantly, he taught me about the difference between hearing and listening, between looking and seeing. Most people went through life with their senses turned down, filtering out anything that did not demand their immediate attention. My father lived with his senses turned all the way up, noticing details that other people missed, hearing sounds that other people ignored. Listen, he would say, holding a newly rest-rung violin up to my ear and playing a single note. What do you hear? First, I just heard a note, a violin sound. Nothing special. But over time, I learned to hear what he heard. The subtle overtones that told you about the quality of the wood. The tiny buzzes and rattles that indicated a loose fitting or a crack in the body. The way the sound bloomed and decayed, revealing the instrument's age and history and potential. Everything talks, he would say. Most people just do not know how to listen. And I learned about the secrets. It started with the German workshop violin, the one with the lock of hair hidden in the neck block. My father showed me the compartment, let me hold the tiny blue ribbon in my hands, told me about the months he had spent trying to trace the original family. I never found them, he said. The violin came from an estate sale in Danbury. The previous owner was a music teacher who had bought it at a flea market in the 1970s. Before that, the trail goes cold. What about the hair? Could you do DNA testing or something? I considered it. But then I thought about the person who hid this here. They wanted their daughter to find it someday. They wanted it to stay inside this violin, protected, waiting. If I remove it, I break that intention. I end the story before it is finished. But the story might never be finished. Then it never finishes. That is okay. He hung the violin back on its peg, handling it with the same gentleness he might use with a sleeping child. Some stories are not meant to end. They are meant to continue, passed from one keeper to the next, until the right person finally comes along. How do you know if you are the right person? He looked at me with those calm gray eyes, and something shifted in his expression. Something that looked almost like hope. You know because you asked that question, he said. After that, he showed me more of the secrets. Not all at once. Over years, in quiet moments between restorations, he would take a violin off the wall and show me what he had found inside it. A love letter from 1912, tucked between the ribs and the lining. A photograph of a family in formal dress, hidden beneath the fingerboard. A tiny scroll of paper with Hebrew text, concealed inside the sound post hole. Every violin had a story. Every secret had a history. Why do people hide things in violins? I asked one night, when I was 16 and had been apprenticing in the workshop for 4 years. Because violins survive, my father said. Wars destroy houses. Fires burn documents. Banks fail. Governments fall. But a good violin lasts for centuries. It gets passed down, inherited, treasured. If you want to hide something and have it found by your descendants 100 years from now, a violin is one of the safest places in the world. Did you ever find anything valuable? I mean, money valuable? He hesitated. It was the only time I ever saw my father hesitate when answering a question. Once, he said. A long time ago. What was it? I will show you someday. When you are ready. I did not understand what he meant by that. I thought I was ready. I was 16, practically an adult, already capable of basic repairs and restorations under his supervision. What more did I need to be ready for? Took me 20 more years to find out. I went to college at my mother's insistence, got a degree in business administration because she said I needed something practical to fall back on. I got a job at an insurance company in Hartford, spent my weeks reviewing claims and attending meetings and pretending to care about quarterly projections. But every weekend, I drove home to New Haven and spent Saturday and Sunday in my father's workshop. The routine never changed. We would work side by side, sometimes talking, sometimes silent, our hands moving in parallel as we cleaned and adjusted and repaired the instruments that came to him from all over the Northeast. He had a reputation by then, a quiet fame among serious collectors and musicians who knew that Henry Ashford could restore a damaged violin to its original voice in ways that other luthiers could not match. He never advertised. He did not need to. The violin spoke for him. My brother and sister drifted away entirely. Marcus became a real estate developer in Florida, called maybe once a year on holidays, had not visited in over a decade. Charlotte married a lawyer and moved to Seattle, sent Christmas cards with photos of her children, never mentioned our father. They had their mother's perspective. To them, he was a ghost who had haunted their childhood, a presence that was technically there but never really available. They did not understand that his availability came in a different form, that he was always there for anyone who wanted to sit with him and learn. They never wanted to learn. I did. The cancer came when I was 34. He hid it from me for 3 months, the same way he hid everything, quietly and completely. I only found out when I arrived for a weekend visit and found him collapsed on the workshop floor, too weak to climb the stairs. How long? I asked in the hospital, after the doctors had explained that the pancreatic cancer had metastasized, that treatment might buy time but would not provide a cure. Long enough, he said. Long enough for what? To finish the work. I did not know what he meant. The workshop was full of instruments awaiting restoration. There was always more work, always another violin that needed his attention. How could he possibly finish? But he was not talking about the restorations. Over the next 4 months, as the cancer ate away at his body, my father worked on the notebook, the leather-bound journal that I would later find with my name on the cover. He wrote for hours every day, filling page after page with his careful script, documenting things he had never told anyone. "What are you writing?" I asked one afternoon, sitting beside his bed in the hospice facility. "Instructions," he said. His voice was weak, but his eyes were clear. "For you." "Instructions for what?" "The violins." He reached out and took my hand, his fingers still calloused from decades of work even though he had not held a tool in weeks. "All 47 of them. I have written down everything I found, everything I researched, everything I could not bring myself to share while I was alive." "Why could you not share it?" He was quiet for a long moment, his breath shallow and labored. "Because I was afraid," he finally said. "Afraid that if I told anyone, they would want me to sell, to profit, to turn the secrets into money." He squeezed my hand. "But you are not like that, Nathan. You never were. You understand that some things are more valuable than money." "What things?" "Stories, connections, the trust of people who hid their most precious possessions inside instruments they loved, hoping that someday, someone worthy would find them." He smiled, the same rare smile I remembered from childhood. "You are worthy, Nathan. You always were." He died 3 days later. I was holding his hand when he stopped breathing. The room was quiet except for the hum of machines and the distant sounds of the hospice going about its business. Outside the window, it was snowing, fat white flakes drifting down through the gray afternoon light. My father's hand was still warm in mine when he took his last breath. There was no struggle, no dramatic final moment. One breath and then nothing, the absence of sound where sound had been. I sat with him for a long time after he was gone. I did not call the nurses right away. I just held his hand and thought about all the things he had taught me, all the hours we had spent together in that basement workshop, all the secrets he had kept and was now passing on to me. He had spent his life surrounded by instruments that could make music, but he rarely played them himself. His gift was not performance. It was preservation. It was the ability to take something broken and make it whole, to find the story inside the wood and protect it until the right person came along. That was his legacy. Not the violins themselves, but the understanding that some things are more valuable than money, that some secrets are worth keeping, that patience and attention and care are their own kind of wealth. When I finally called the nurses and they came to take care of the body, I walked out of that hospice with only one thing in my hands: the leather notebook my father had given me 2 weeks before, filled with 35 years of discoveries and the trust that I would know what to do with them. The will reading was exactly what I expected. Marcus and Charlotte flew in, spent 45 minutes in the lawyer's office looking uncomfortable, and flew out again the same day. Marcus got the house, which he immediately listed for sale. Charlotte got the savings account, $280,000 that she said would go toward her children's college funds. I got the workshop. That is it, Marcus said, not even trying to hide his relief that he would not have to deal with 47 old violins and a basement full of tools. He left you the instruments? The instruments and everything in them. Everything in them? What does that mean? I am not sure yet. Marcus shrugged and signed the papers. Charlotte hugged me stiffly and promised to call more often, a promise we both knew she would not keep. And then I was alone, in a workshop filled with my father's life work, holding a notebook that contained 35 years of secrets. I read the notebook in one sitting, from the first entry to the last. The leather was soft and worn, the pages yellowed with age and handling. My father had been writing in this notebook for over 3 decades, adding entries whenever he discovered something new, updating old entries when he learned more about an instrument's history. Every violin was documented: the provenance, the restoration work performed, the date of acquisition, the price paid. But it was not dry, clinical information. My father wrote about each instrument the way another person might write about a friend. He described their personalities, their quirks, the particular ways they responded to his touch. Violin number 4, one entry read: French, circa 1850, likely from the Meyercourt workshops. Purchased at auction in Boston, 1989, for $75. In poor condition when acquired, with extensive worm damage to the backplate and a collapsed bass bar. She resisted restoration at first. Every repair I made seemed to create a new problem. The wood did not want to be fixed. But I persisted, and after 6 months of careful work, she began to open up. Her voice is small but sweet, with a melancholy quality that speaks of long silences. And for 41 of the 47 instruments, a detailed description of what my father had found hidden inside. Lock of hair and ribbon, origin unknown. Violin number 1. Love letter in German, dated 1917, signed Your Clara Forever. Violin number 3. The letter describes a young man going off to war, promising to return and marry the woman he loves. My father had researched the name and found a death record from Passchendaele. The woman never married. Photograph of a woman in a wedding dress. Inscription on back reads, Vienna, 1928. Violin number 7. My father traced the photographer's studio. It was destroyed during Kristallnacht in 1938. Receipt for passage on a ship from Hamburg to New York, dated April 1939, hidden in a pocket carved into the neck heel. Violin number 12. The passenger name was David Rothstein. Immigration records confirmed he arrived in New York in May 1939. Gold ring with Hebrew inscription, wrapped in cloth and concealed inside the peg box. Violin number 19. The inscription translated as, My beloved is mine and I am his. Tiny scroll of paper with Hebrew text, concealed inside the sound post hole. Violin number 21. A rabbi had identified it as a mezuzah scroll, a prayer typically placed on door frames. The owner had hidden it inside the violin to protect it during a time of persecution. The entries went on, each one a window into a life I would never know, a story that had been waiting decades or centuries for someone to discover it. But it was the entry for violin number 23 that stopped my breath. Violin number 23. Acquired at an estate sale in Greenwich, Connecticut, 1987. Price paid $200. Condition: poor, with significant damage to the top plate and missing strings. Initial examination revealed unusual construction characteristics inconsistent with the apparent age of the instrument. Subsequent research, conducted over a period of 11 years, has led me to conclude that this violin was built by Antonio Stradivari in Cremona, Italy, in the year 1715. The instrument matches the description of a violin known as the Messenger, documented in historical records as having been commissioned by a Venetian noble family and subsequently lost during the Napoleonic Wars. It resurfaced briefly in Berlin in 1936, in the possession of a Jewish musician named Isaac Goldman, before disappearing again in 1938. Based on ship manifests and immigration records, I believe the violin was carried to America by Goldman's daughter, Ruth, who fled Germany in 1938 at the age of 16. Ruth Goldman settled in Connecticut, married, changed her name, and lived until 2019. She died without heirs, and her possessions were sold at the estate sale where I acquired the instrument. The violin is authentic. I have verified this through comparison with known Stradivari instruments, analysis of the wood and varnish, and examination of the label inside the body. I have shared my findings with no one. Estimated value, $12 to $18 million. I have not sold this instrument because it does not belong to me. It belongs to the story. It belongs to Isaac Goldman and his daughter Ruth and the music they made on it before the world tried to destroy them. It belongs to whoever finds it next and understands what it means to hold something that has survived so much. Nathan, when you read this, you will know what to do. Not because I told you, but because I taught you. The violin speaks. Listen to it. It will tell you its story the same way it told me. And when you are finished listening, decide what the story needs. Not what you need. What the story needs. I trust you, Dad. I sat in the workshop for a long time after reading that entry. The violin was hanging on the wall in front of me, indistinguishable from the others to an untrained eye, just another old instrument waiting for someone to bring it back to life. A Stradivari, $12 to $18 million. Hidden in plain sight for 35 years because my father believed that some things were more valuable than money. The appraisal took 3 months. I did not rush it. I could not rush it. This was not like taking a painting to an auction house or bringing jewelry to a pawn shop. A potential Stradivari required the most rigorous authentication process in the world of musical instruments. I spent weeks researching authenticators before settling on Dr. Elena Marchetti, a woman whose name appeared in every article about verified Stradivari instruments from the past 30 years. She had trained in Cremona, the Italian city where Stradivari had lived and worked. She had studied under masters who had themselves studied under masters, an unbroken chain of knowledge stretching back centuries. When I contacted her office, her assistant asked what I needed evaluated. I said it was a violin that my father, a luthier, believed to be significant. The assistant offered an appointment in 6 months. Then I sent a photograph of the label inside the instrument. Dr. Marchetti called me personally within an hour. "Where did you get this?" she asked, her voice tight with something that might have been excitement or might have been disbelief. "It belonged to my father." "Your father was a luthier?" "For 40 years. And he never showed this to anyone? Never sought authentication?" "He spent 11 years authenticating it himself. He just did not tell anyone what he found." There was a long pause on the line. "I will be in Connecticut tomorrow." She arrived at 9 in the morning and did not leave until nearly 6 in the evening. She examined every millimeter of the instrument with magnifying glasses and specialized lights and tools I had never seen before. She measured the thickness of the wood in dozens of places, compared the varnish to samples she had brought from her laboratory, studied the scroll under a microscope powerful enough to see individual wood cells. She took photographs from every angle. She recorded audio of the instrument's voice, plucking individual strings and recording the precise frequencies they produced. She traced the grain patterns in the wood, comparing them to documented Stradivari instruments from the same period. 3 times during the day, she stopped and stared at the violin for long minutes, saying nothing, her face unreadable. When she finally sat down across from me, her hands were shaking slightly. "Where did you get this?" she asked again. "My father bought it at an estate sale in Greenwich in 1987. For $200. $200. She shook her head slowly, like she was trying to reconcile something that did not make sense. I have spent my entire career looking for instruments like this. I have traveled to every corner of the world, examined thousands of violins, authenticated maybe a dozen genuine Stradivari's. And your father had one hanging on his wall the whole time. He did not want anyone to know. Why not? He could have been famous. He could have been wealthy beyond imagination. He did not want fame or wealth. He wanted to protect the story. She looked at me for a long moment, her expression shifting from confusion to something like understanding. "The messenger," she said quietly. "I have read about this instrument. There are references to it in 19th century catalogs. A Venetian noble family commissioned it directly from Stradivari in 1715. It passed through several collections, disappeared during the Napoleonic Wars, resurfaced briefly in the 20th century. My father traced it to a Jewish musician in Berlin, Isaac Goldman, and then to America? His daughter Ruth carried it out of Germany in 1938. She was 16 years old. She kept it hidden for the rest of her life." Dr. Marchetti looked at the violin, still lying on the table between us, its worn varnish glowing in the workshop light. For a moment, I thought I saw tears in her eyes. "Do you know what this means?" she asked. "This is not just a Stradivari. This is a Stradivari with a documented history of survival. It survived the Napoleonic Wars. It survived the Holocaust. It has been hiding for decades, waiting for someone to recognize what it was. My father recognized it. Your father was either a genius or the luckiest man in the world." She paused. "Or perhaps both. What is it worth?" She hesitated. In her world, that question was complicated. The value of a Stradivari depended on many factors: its condition, its provenance, its sound quality, the economic climate, the particular tastes of wealthy collectors. At auction, with full documentation and authentication, this instrument would likely sell for between $15 and $20 million, possibly more, given its historical significance. I had known, from my father's notes, that the number would be large, but hearing it spoken aloud by an expert made it suddenly real in a way it had not been before. $20 million. Hanging on a wall in a basement in New Haven for 35 years. "What are you going to do with it?" Dr. Marchetti asked. It was the question I had been asking myself for 3 months. $12 to $18 million. More money than I would make in 10 lifetimes. Enough to quit my job, buy a house, never worry about anything again. But that was not what the story needed. "I am going to find the Goldman family," I said. "There has to be someone left. A cousin, a distant relative, someone who remembers Isaac and Ruth and the music they made. And when I find them, I am going to give them back their violin." Dr. Marchetti stared at me. "You are going to give away an $18 million instrument?" "It was never mine to keep. It was mine to protect until the right person came along." She did not say anything for a long time. Then she smiled, a small private smile that reminded me of my father. "Your father taught you well," she said. "Took me 8 months to find them. The search was not straightforward. The Holocaust had shattered the Goldman family, scattering survivors across the world and erasing entire branches from existence. I started with the information in my father's notebook and worked outward, following threads that sometimes led to dead ends and sometimes led to fragments of a larger story. I learned that Isaac Goldman had been a concert violinist in Berlin during the 1920s and 30s, a rising star who had performed with major orchestras across Europe. He had been Jewish at a time when being Jewish in Germany meant watching your world slowly collapse around you. I found a concert program from 1934 that listed him as a featured soloist. I found a newspaper review from 1936 that praised his interpretation of the Brahms Violin Concerto. I found a photograph of him standing on a stage in Munich, holding a violin that I now recognized as the instrument in my father's workshop. And I found documentation of his death in 1941, in a place whose name I could barely bring myself to type into search engines. But his daughter Ruth had survived. That much my father's research had confirmed. She had fled to America in 1938, carrying the violin in a battered case, arriving in New York Harbor with nothing else to her name. She had changed her identity somewhere along the way. Ruth Goldman became Ruth Golden, then Ruth Wheeler when she married a hardware store owner in Connecticut in 1947. She had lived quietly for decades, never playing music again, never speaking about her past. She had died in 2019 at the age of 97, leaving no children, and her possessions had been sold at the estate sale where my father had found the violin. I searched for other Goldmans who might have survived. I contacted Jewish genealogical societies and Holocaust remembrance organizations. I posted inquiries on ancestry websites and traced shipping manifests from the 1930s. The search led me through archives in Washington and Jerusalem, through faded documents in languages I could not read, through stories of survival and loss that kept me awake at night. Finally, 8 months after I began, I found a connection. Isaac Goldman had a brother named Samuel who had emigrated to Palestine in 1936, before the worst of the persecution began. Samuel's line had continued, producing children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. One branch had moved to Australia in the 1960s. Another had stayed in Israel. A third had come to America in the 1980s. The closest living relative to Ruth Goldman was her great-niece, a woman named Sarah Goldman Weber who taught music at a middle school in Cleveland. She was 62 years old. She had never heard of the violin. I called her on a Tuesday evening. "Mrs. Goldman Weber? My name is Nathan Ashford. I am calling about something that belonged to your family a long time ago." There was a pause on the line. "What kind of something?" "A violin. It belonged to your great-great-uncle, Isaac Goldman." Another pause, longer this time. "I have heard that name. My grandmother mentioned him once when I was a child. She said he was a famous musician before the war." "He was. And I believe I have found his violin." I told her the story as briefly as I could. Isaac and the violin in Berlin. Ruth carrying it to America. The estate sale where my father had bought it. The 11 years of research that had proven its authenticity. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Are you trying to sell it?" "No. I am trying to return it." I flew to Cleveland with the instrument in a special case my father had built decades ago, designed to protect it from temperature changes and humidity and the thousand small dangers that threatened antique wood. Sarah met me at her front door, a small woman with graying hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. She looked at the case in my hands and then at me, waiting for an explanation that she was not sure she wanted to hear. "My name is Nathan Ashford," I said. "My father was a luthier. He spent 35 years researching a violin that he believed belonged to your family." I told her everything. Not just the facts, but the meaning behind them. Isaac Goldman, the musician who had fled Berlin but had not survived. Ruth, his daughter, who had carried the violin to America and kept it hidden for 80 years because she could not bear to play it or to let it go. The estate sale where my father had bought it for $200, not knowing what it was. The 11 years of research that had proven its authenticity. The decision my father had made to protect the story rather than profit from it. And then I opened the case and showed her what was inside. Sarah stood in her doorway for a long moment, staring at the violin that her great-great-uncle had played in concert halls across Europe 100 years ago. The instrument that had survived wars and persecution and decades of forgetting. The story that my father had spent his life protecting. When she reached out to touch it, her hand was trembling. "May I?" she asked. "It is yours. It was always yours." She lifted the violin from the case with the careful reverence of someone handling a sacred object. She held it up to the light, examining the worn varnish, the scratches that told stories she was only beginning to understand. And then she started to cry. "I never knew," she said. "My grandmother mentioned a violin once when I was a child. She said it was the only thing her sister Ruth brought from the old country. But Ruth never talked about it. She never played it. She kept it hidden her whole life. She was protecting it, the way my father protected it. And now you are giving it to me? It was never mine. It was always yours. I was just the person who found it and brought it home." Sarah invited me inside. We sat in her living room, the violin between us, and she told me stories about her family. About Isaac, who had been a prodigy, who had played for kings and presidents before everything fell apart. About Ruth, who had never played music again after coming to America, who had packed away her talent along with her violin and spent the rest of her life in silence. She was not silent, I said. She was waiting for someone to find the instrument and bring it back to the family. Waiting for the story to continue. Sarah looked at the violin, running her fingers over the worn varnish, touching the strings that had not been played in decades. "I cannot accept this," she said. "It is worth millions of dollars. I am a middle school music teacher. I would not know what to do with it. You could sell it. You could donate it to a museum. You could learn to play it yourself. That is not my decision to make." "Then what is your decision?" I thought about my father, bent over his workbench, listening to wood that most people thought was silent. I thought about the 47 violins and the 41 secrets and the stories that had survived because one man decided to protect them instead of profit from them. "My decision was to find you," I said. "That is all I was meant to do. The rest is your story now." I flew home to New Haven that night, holding the empty case that had protected the violin for 35 years. The case felt lighter than it should have, as if it was mourning the loss of the instrument it had been built to protect. But I knew the truth. The case was not empty. It was full of the memory of what it had held, full of the story it had been part of. That story was continuing now, in a museum in Tel Aviv, where thousands of people would see the violin and learn about Isaac Goldman and his daughter Ruth and the music they had made before the world tried to destroy them. The workshop was quiet when I returned, the way it always was without my father in it. But it was not empty. It was full of violins and tools and the memories of 4 generations of Ashfords who had dedicated their lives to the craft. I walked along the rows of instruments, counting them. 46 now with the Stradivari gone. 46 stories that still needed keepers. I picked up my father's tools. The planes and chisels and brushes that had shaped thousands of instruments over 40 years. They fit my hands the way they had fit his father's hands and his father's before that. The wood remembers everything my father had told me. I picked up a violin that needed restoration, a damaged instrument from the 1890s that had come in last month and been waiting for attention ever since. The wood remembers, I thought, and now so do I. I started to work. Sarah called me 6 months later. She had decided to donate the Stradivari to a museum in Israel, where it would be displayed as part of an exhibit on Jewish musicians who had been killed or displaced during the Holocaust. The exhibit would tell the story of Isaac Goldman, of his daughter Ruth, of the instrument that had carried their legacy across oceans and decades. "There is one condition," she said. The museum agreed to it. "What condition?" "The plaque under the display case will mention your father. It will say that Henry Ashford, luthier, discovered the violin and spent 11 years researching its provenance. It will say that he could have sold it for millions but chose to protect the story instead." I did not say anything for a moment. My father had never wanted recognition. He had never wanted his name attached to anything except the instruments he built and restored. But this was different. This was not fame. This was acknowledgement. A small brass plaque in a museum thousands of miles away, telling the world that one man had understood what really mattered. "He would have liked that," I said. "He would not have admitted it, but he would have liked it. Will you come to the opening? It is in Tel Aviv next spring." "I will be there." I hung up the phone and looked around the workshop. The tools on the walls, the violins waiting to be healed, the leather notebook on my workbench, open to a page I had been studying, trying to trace the provenance of yet another instrument with a secret hidden inside. My father had spent 40 years listening to wood and finding the stories it kept. Now it was my turn. My mother called last month. First time in 15 years. She had heard about the Stradivari somehow. The news had made some small waves in the collector world, and someone at one of her charity events had mentioned that her ex-husband had discovered and authenticated a multi-million-dollar violin and given it away. "Why did you not sell it?" she asked. "Because it was not mine to sell. It was in his workshop. He paid for it. Legally, it belonged to him, which means it belonged to you when he died. Legally, maybe, But that is not the same as actually owning something. She was quiet for a moment. Your father really did ruin you. You are just like him. You could have been wealthy. You could have been someone. Instead you are in that basement, playing with wood, just like he did. I am not playing with wood, Mom. I am listening to it. That does not mean anything. It means everything. It is just not something you can hear. She hung up without saying goodbye. I did not mind. She was not wrong about me being like my father. I had his hands, his patience, his ability to sit with something broken and figure out how to make it whole again. But she was wrong about the basement. It was not a place of hiding or escape. It was a place of connection. Every violin on those walls was a bridge to someone who had lived before me, who had loved and feared and hoped and hidden their most precious possessions inside an instrument they trusted to outlast them. I was not alone in that workshop. I never had been. I was surrounded by stories, by secrets, by the accumulated weight of centuries of human experience. Every time I picked up a tool, I was continuing a conversation that had started long before I was born and would continue long after I was gone. My father had understood that. He had spent 40 years listening to wood that most people thought was silent, finding the stories that everyone else overlooked. He had been patient enough to wait decades for the right moment to share what he knew. And now that patience had been rewarded. The messenger was going home. The Goldman family would be remembered. The story would continue. Marcus called last week. He had seen the news coverage of the museum opening, the story of the Stradivari and its journey from Berlin to New Haven to Tel Aviv. You really did it, he said. You really gave away a $20 million violin. I returned it to its rightful owners. Same thing. Not the same thing at all. He was quiet for a moment. I have been thinking about Dad, about the workshop, about all those years I thought he was wasting his life. And I was wrong. He was not wasting anything. He was building something. I just could not see it because I was looking for the wrong kind of value. What kind of value were you looking for? The kind that shows up in bank accounts. The kind that impresses people at parties. He paused. The kind that does not actually matter. I did not say anything. This was the most honest conversation I had had with my brother in years. I want to come see the workshop, he said. I want to see what Dad spent his life building. I want to understand what I missed. You are welcome anytime. Will you show me how to listen? To the wood, I mean. The way Dad used to talk about it. I thought about all the years my brother had walked past that basement door without ever going down the stairs. All the opportunities he had missed to learn what our father could teach. All the stories he had never heard because he never thought to ask. I will try, I said. But it takes time. Takes patience. It takes a willingness to sit with something you do not understand and wait for it to reveal itself. I have time now, he said. I have all the time in the world. He is coming next month. We will sit in the workshop together, surrounded by 46 violins and the secrets they keep. I will hand him a tool and show him how to use it. I will play him a note and ask him what he hears. I do not know if he will learn to listen the way our father taught me. That is not something you can guarantee. It is something that either happens or it does not. But I am going to try, because that is what the story needs. Not just to be preserved, but to be passed on. Not just to be protected, but to be shared. That is what my father taught me in the end. The secrets inside the violins were never meant to stay hidden forever. They were meant to be discovered. They were meant to be understood. They were meant to connect people across time and space, reminding us that we are all part of a larger story. Every violin has a story. My father taught me that. But he also taught me something more important. Every story has a listener, someone who will sit with it patiently, waiting for it to reveal itself, someone who will protect it until the right moment comes, someone who will know what the story needs and will have the courage to give it. My father was that listener for 40 years. Now I am. And whoever comes after me, whoever I teach and train and pass these instruments to, they will be the next. The wood remembers. And now, so do I. 46 violins remain in my workshop. 46 stories waiting to continue. I do not know what secrets I will find in them. I do not know whose letters or photographs or treasures are hidden inside, waiting for the right person to come along. But I know I will listen. I know I will protect whatever I find, the way my father protected it, until the story tells me what it needs. That is what it means to be a luthier. That is what it means to be Henry Ashford's son. Thank you for walking this journey with me. Before you go, I have left 2 more stories here on your screen. Both from men who discovered that family is not always who you are born to. It is who stands by you when the truth comes out. Click on whichever one calls to you. And if you want to join our community of people who understand what it is like to be the outsider looking in, that notification bell is your invitation. Until tomorrow, remember, your story matters, even if they tried to erase it.